Opening hook and counter and heated start. I barely had time to slam my car door before I heard his voice. You've got some fucking nerve, you know that? Gary Patterson, HOA president and certified neighborhood tyrant, was stomping across my lawn like a man on a mission. Clipboard is on one hand, and a bright red violation notice is on the other. I met him halfway, not about to let this asshole plant his boots on my grass. Afternoon, Gary, I said, arms crossed. What's got you foaming at the mouth today? He thrust the paper into my chest, so hard I had to take a step back. You think you're cute, huh? His face was red, veins popping in his temple. You think you can just throw up some shitty little shed like this is a goddamn trailer park? I took the paper and read it, even though I already knew what it was, a notice of violation. Apparently, my new backyard shed threatened the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. I glanced over his shoulder right at his house, the one with constant traffic, strange deliveries, and those little unmarked vans showing up at odd hours. I had kept my mouth shut about it. Until now. I see, I said, folding the notice neatly. And I'm sure you follow every HOA rule to the letter, don't you, Gary? His eyes flickered. A moment of hesitation. But then he was back on the attack. This is a fucking warning, he growled. Take it down, or the next step is fines. And after that, we take legal action. I laughed. Loudly. Right in his face. That set him off. You think this is funny? He spat. You want to play hardball, fine. I will fucking bury you in violations. Your grass is too long? Citation. Your trash cans are out an hour too early? Citation. You leave your Christmas lights up past January? Citation. He was shaking now, absolutely losing his shit in my front yard. And that's when I hit him with it. Well, I said, stepping forward, lowering my voice. I guess I'll have to call code enforcement then. His face dropped. What? You know, I continued, leaning in just enough for him to feel the threat. I'm pretty sure running an illegal business from your house is against HOA rules, too. Silence. For the first time, Gary had nothing to say. His mouth opened, then closed. His brain is desperately trying to come up with a response. But he knew he fucking knew. I could see the panic creeping in. He had spent years bullying the neighborhood, rigging the rules to work in his favor. But now he realized he had picked the wrong guy to mess with. I smiled. Enjoy your day, Gary. Then I walked inside and shut the door right in his face. The war had begun. Gary was pounding on my door less than 24 hours later. I took my sweet time answering. The second I cracked it open, he shoved another notice in my face. Guess you didn't get the fucking message, he snarled. I snatched the paper. Violation again. This time, unapproved exterior structure, immediate removal required. I smiled. Oh, this was getting fun. Fast response time, Gary. You must be motivated. You don't get it, do you? His breath reeked of coffee and rage. This is happening. You're fucked. I folded the notice neatly. You know what I find funny? How quick you are to throw rules around. But you don't seem to mind breaking a few yourself. His eyes narrowed. What the fuck are you talking about? I tilted my head toward his house. That little consulting business you run out of your garage. I said, voice calm. City permits don't cover that, do they? Gary went still. Real still. Then a chuckle. You think you're some kind of lawyer? Huh. He leaned in, his breath hot with desperation. I own this neighborhood, asshole. You're just some dick with a hammer and a dream. I held his stare, let the silence stretch. Then I said it, soft but deadly. Code enforcement's gonna love this. For the first time, he blinked. I smiled. See you around, Gary. And I shut the door in his face. Again. I didn't just call code enforcement. I built a fucking case. For days, I watched. I documented. Every single sketchy delivery. Every car parked outside his house past midnight. Every neighbor who grumbled about the HOA's bullshit. And then, I started talking. It started small. A casual chat with Mrs. Langley next door. She'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years and had gotten more citations than she had birthdays. You know, she muttered, peeking through her curtains. I always wondered why his driveway looked like a damn UPS hub. Next was Tom from 2 doors down. HOA fined him last year for unauthorized holiday decorations. But Gary's backyard tiki bar? Fine. One by one, people started opening up. And the stories? Oh, they were fucking gold. Gary's business wasn't just some small gig. He was moving thousands of dollars in unlicensed sales right under HOA protection. And now, I had proof. The best part? I wasn't the only one pissed off. I met with a former HOA board member, someone who had quit in frustration years ago. She laughed when I told her what was happening. A bitter, knowing laugh. They cover for each other, she said. Gary? He's been untouchable for years. But if you have proof, that changes everything. I dropped my folder onto the cafe table. Take a look. She flipped through pages of timestamps, photos, and printed reports. Her eyes widened. Oh shit, she whispered. You went all in. I sipped my coffee. He came after me first. She shut the folder. You turn this in. The whole board is going down with him. I grinned. Perfect. That night, I sent a single email to City Code Enforcement. The subject line? Ongoing HOA corruption and illegal business operations urgent. I attached everything. Then, I waited. It didn't take long. The first citation hit Gary's mailbox 3 days later. Then a second. By the end of the week, city inspectors were parked outside his house. And the best part? The neighborhood was watching. People weren't afraid anymore. The HOA's iron grip? Slipping. But Gary? He wasn't done fighting yet. And neither was I. The first code enforcement officer showed up Wednesday morning. I knew because I was already watching from my kitchen window, coffee in hand, when the marked city vehicle rolled up to Gary's driveway. And Gary? Oh, he lost his fucking mind. I stepped outside, just in time to hear him yelling. This is fucking harassment, he bellowed, standing in his driveway, arms flailing like a man on the verge of a stroke. The city official, a short, unimpressed woman in a clipboard holster, didn't even blink. Sir, we've received multiple complaints about an unlicensed business operating out of this residence. She handed him a bright orange citation. You'll need to schedule an inspection within the next 7 days. Gary snatched the paper like it had personally offended him. This is some bullshit. He spat. Then, like he suddenly remembered his audience, he turned to me, pointing directly at my chest. You think this is over? You think you can fucking... I cut him off. Gary. I took a slow sip of my coffee. You should watch your language in front of a city official. The officer glanced between us, sensing the hostility. Gary ground his teeth. His jaw flexed like he was chewing on concrete. Then, without another word, he stormed inside and slammed the door. I didn't move. Didn't stop smiling. Because I knew the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. That same night, the HOA held an emergency meeting. I showed up. The room was packed. More than usual. People were whispering, throwing looks at Gary, who was sitting at the front like a fucking dictator clutching a grenade. He wasted zero time getting to the point. Neighbors, he started, voice tight with forced politeness. I want to address the attacks happening against this community. I barked out a laugh, loud enough to make people turn. Gary's nostrils flared. Certain individuals, he sneered, glaring at me, have been spreading malicious lies about our HOA leadership. Murmurs. People are shifting uncomfortably. I raised my hand. Question Gary. He ignored me. We need unity, he continued. Not traitors trying to destroy what we've built. I stood up. Loud scraping. Every eye turned. Speaking of traitors, I said, I have a question. I held up a thick folder. Gary's face drained of color. The room went dead fucking silent. I flipped it open. Pulled out the first page. Can you explain why the city just cited your property for an illegal business? Gasps. Someone in the back muttered, oh shit. Gary jumped to his feet. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Oh. I pulled out a printed record. Because, according to public records, you never got a permit. And this. I held up a signed complaint from a neighbor. Looks like multiple people saw unlicensed activity at your house. People turned to each other, whispering. Even Gary's board members were starting to shift in their seats. I wasn't just winning. I was fucking dismantling him. Gary exploded. You smug little shit. He slammed his fist on the table, knocking over a water bottle. You think you can just fuck with me like this? Oh, Gary, I said, smirking. I'm just getting started. The tension snapped. Neighbors stood up, started talking. "This is bullshit," someone muttered. "He's been breaking rules for years. You fined me for a mailbox color, but you get a free pass?" Gary was losing control. His final move? Pure desperation. He pointed at me. Dead silence. Then someone laughed. Not just anyone. A board member. The room cracked open. More laughter. More whispers. More realization that Gary wasn't a leader. He was a fucking joke. I leaned forward. "Gary." My voice was calm, deadly. "I think we're done here." And just like that, his reign ended. By the time the night was over, the city had launched a full investigation. Gary? Finished. The HOA. On life support. And me? Still standing. Want me to go with the final knockout section? The morning after the HOA meltdown, I woke up to the sound of its enforcement knocking on Gary's door. It was me over. From my front porch, coffee in hand, I watched as 3 officials stood on Gary's lawn, clipboard warriors in full force. One of them no-nonsense guy with a badge clipped to his belt spoke loud enough for the whole goddamn neighborhood to hear. "Mr. Patterson, we need access to your property. You've been reported for operating an illegal business, violating zoning laws, and failing to disclose taxable income." Gary stood frozen in the doorway, barefoot, robe half open, looking like a man who had just realized he was on the Titanic. This is fucking insane," he stammered. The officer didn't even blink. "Sir, if you refuse access, we'll have to escalate this to a formal warrant." Silence. Then slowly, painfully, Gary stepped aside. I let out a low whistle. This was going better than I thought. A few of the neighbors had stepped outside, pretending to check their mail, but we all knew what was happening. I made my way over to Tom from 2 doors down. "You see this shit?" I said, grinning. He smirked. "I'd sell tickets if I could." Gary stood in his doorway, red-faced and shaking, while the city officials walked into his house. He shot a glare in my direction, your unfiltered hatred. I smiled and raised my coffee cup. "Checkmate, motherfucker." I figured that was the end of it. I figured wrong. Because 20 minutes later, one of the city officials stepped out of Gary's house and pulled out his phone. I heard the words, "Bring another unit." "Oh, shit." Tom glanced at me. What the hell did they just find? We didn't have to wait long for the answer. A second city vehicle rolled up. Then a third. 2 more inspectors climbed out. Gary was eating bullets now. One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, we need to discuss a few things." And then the bomb dropped. "We have strong reason to believe you've been conducting commercial sales without declaring income. Additionally, there are unregistered hazardous materials on site, and we're going to need further inspection." Gary fucking choked. "This is bullshit," he yelled. "I want a lawyer." The officer nodded, completely unfazed. "That's your right." At this point, half the neighborhood had fully gathered to watch. A voice from the crowd, S. Langley, of all people, through the silence. "Karma's a bitch, ain't it, Gary?" Laughter. Oh, it was glorious. I turned to Tom, shaking my head. I knew he was dirty. But this is next level stupid. Gary turned to me, eyes wild. "You did this, you piece of shit." I didn't even flinch. I just shrugged. "No, Gary." I nodded toward the officers. "You did this to yourself." And then, the final nail in the coffin. One of the officers pulled out a sealed document. "We're placing a temporary cease and desist notice on this property." The color changed on Gary's face. I leaned over to Tom, whispering, "I should have brought popcorn." By that evening, the news had spread like wildfire. The HOA Gary's precious little dictatorship was crumbling. A neighborhood group chat started up. People were talking about violations, double standards, and fines that were never fair. By the next morning, an official city public notice was taped to Gary's door. Due to zoning violations, unlicensed operations, and failure to comply with city regulations, this residence is under investigation. Translation? Gary was fucked. I was taking out the trash when I saw him standing in his driveway, just staring at the notice. I let the moment hang, let him feel it. Then casually, I walked past and muttered, "Shame about the shed, huh?" He whipped around so fast I thought his neck might snap. "This isn't over." His voice was low, dangerous, desperate. I stopped. turned. "Oh, Gary," I said, grinning. "It's so fucking over." And then I walked inside while Gary stood there, drowning in the wreckage of his corruption. By the end of the week, the HOA was in full collapse. Gary, facing official charges, and me, still standing. Want me to keep going with the final section? By the end of the week, Gary was a ghost. Not literally, but he might as well have been. His once proud HOA dictator ass now cult around the neighborhood like a man who had just realized the executioner was measuring his neck. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Because 2 days after the city hit him with the cease and desist, the next blow landed. A formal complaint was filed against the entire HOA board. Fraud, misuse of funds, selective enforcement of regulations. The city wasn't just coming for Gary. They were coming for everyone who had backed his bullshit. At first, his lapdog board members tried to distance themselves. "Oh, we didn't know he was breaking the rules. Oh, we trusted Gary to handle everything. Oh, we were just following orders." But it didn't matter, because by now, the neighborhood was out for blood. Tom and a few other pissed-off homeowners had started digging up HOA financial records. And what do you know? The budget wasn't adding up. For years, Gary had been quietly funneling HOA funds for his projects. Fancy dinners? Paid for by HOA funds. Weekend getaways? HOA funds. That big-ass TV in his living room? HOA funds. It was fucking beautiful. The same rules he weaponized against the neighborhood were now the ones burying him alive. And me? I was right there with a shovel, ready to pile on. By the time the HOA had its final, desperate meeting, the room was full. Not just with board members, with residents. The same people Gary had fined, bullied, and threatened for years. And they asked questions. Gary sat at the front, looking like a man about to face a firing squad. "Mr. Patterson," one of the city officials said, flipping through a thick-ass folder of evidence, "would you care to explain these unauthorized expenses?" Gary swallowed hard. I was acting in the best interest of the community. Someone in the back scoffed. Murmurs. Angry ones. Gary saw the writing on the wall. He tried to fight it, but it was over. The city official set down his folder. "The board is being disbanded. A new election will be held immediately." I leaned back, smirking. Tom raised his hand. "I nominate Jeff." "Wait, me." The crowd murmured in agreement. I held up my hands. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't sign up for this shit." Mrs. Langley grinned. "You burned it down, kid. Now help build it back up." I sighed. "Damn it. Fine." 3 months later, the neighborhood was unrecognizable. Gary? Gone. Sold his house and left town. Rumor had it he barely got out before the city slapped him with a lawsuit. The new HOA? Fair. Transparent. No more bullshit. No more rules for thee, not for me. The first order of business? Refunding every bullshit fine Gary had ever issued. People cheered in the streets. And my shed? Still fucking standing. I stood in my yard, watching the neighborhood finally breathe. Tom walked up, grinning. "You know," he said, "you really should have brought popcorn." I laughed. "Next time. Because let's be honest, there's always a next time."